Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Son of a Witch podcast. You know me, I'm Mike D, and we've got my lovely host, Rania, with me as well. Say hello, Rania.
Hi.
And today we've got a special treat for ourselves. We're being a little greedy because it's mainly just for us, but we wanted to put this episode out for everyone else as well. We have an amazing friend and chosen family member, Reverend Paul, with us today. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's our honor. We're ecstatic. We kind of yipped a little bit behind the scenes when you reached out originally. So yeah, it's a pleasure to bring you on.
Thank you.
Reverend Paul he is a witch, he is a teacher, he is an elder in the Cabot tradition. He is a third-degree high priest in the Cabot tradition. He is an amazing artist, and he makes some of the most amazing philtres or spell bottles, whatever you may call it, that you've ever seen. So that is called the Celtic Cork on Etsy, and we are going to do kind of a deep dive and pick at Reverend Paul's brain today and find out his process and what goes into this amazing calling that he has had. So, Rania, you had a couple of questions you wanted to start out with, I think. Did you want to go first?
What drew you, or what was your calling? How did you start making these bottles?
That's a really good question. And, I have throughout my magical career have really just kind of found myself turning around to find myself inside of phenomenon. And in this case, it happened to be my spell bottles. And when I initiated into the Cabot tradition as a third-degree high priest back in 2015, my Reverend Mother, Lori Cabot, she told all of us, first of all, your life is going to change once you initiate, but you will find yourself drawn to whatever it is that your ministry is going to be, or whatever your way of healing or helping humanity is going to be. And so at that point, you really just need to start listening and paying attention. And one of my longtime friends and professors of art history, I was visiting her in her art studio one day, and she handed me an old bottle. And she said, "Would you do me a favor?" And I said, "Yes, sure, of course." And she said, could you put a bottle together for me so that I could connect with departed loved ones? And that was the beginning. So throughout my entire life and career, I've been surrounded by spirits and have been, in a sense, connected to that other world. And so the spirits work through you. And so I heard that as a request, more so not just for my professor, but that people need vehicles for healing. They need physical objects to help them with their healing. And so that very first philtre that I made was my Hallow, my Speaking to the Dead philtre. And I made that for her. That was my very, very first spell bottle. And then I ended up making another one for another very, very good friend of mine when he heard that I had done this. And that's when the ball started rolling. And at that point, I just started doing a lot of research and finding how spell bottles were created, how long they've been around, and what people use them for, which primarily was for protective means. And but again, being inspired by so many different people out there that are doing spell bottles in their own ways and in their own formulas. And again, coming from the Cabot tradition, I don't know if you've seen any of Lori Cabot or Penny Cabot spell bottles, but they're phenomenal jewel encrusted pieces of art. And again, each one has a healing intention or an intention for the recipient of it. So I naturally went to both of them as elders and as advisors, just to see, how do I fit into this? Because I don't want to make a spell bottle that's just like anybody else's. Again, this is a phenomenon, again, that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. So how do we find our own personal authentic frequency, our own magic to put into a philtre for someone to have? And again, the word philtre, comes from, it's Greek and comes from a place of love, making something out of love. And But in the Cabot tradition, we learned that philtres are any sort of mixture of herbs. It doesn't really specifically have to be the intention of love, but I put love in every single one of my bottles. So whether or not somebody wants to split a hair and say, well, you're making philtres, but that's really only a love bottle, it's like it really depends on your intention, and intention is everything, along with the science of the witchcraft that goes in it.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
I guess, and I recall it now, but I guess I had forgotten that Hallow was your first bottle.
Yeah.
And the reason that jumped out to me just now is yesterday. So that's another bottle I'm going to have to get from you, because yesterday was actually, and other listeners, you may be going through the same thing. And if you are, this is definitely a way to help. But yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of my mom's passing. And it was a rough day. It was bittersweet. Like, I've come to terms with it, but I didn't get to say goodbye to her. And that's haunted me to this day. So yeah, that would really help to communicate.
Absolutely. No, other recipients, when they've gotten them, they've had some sort of correspondence or some sort of confirmation that their loved one is nearby. Like, one person opened up their bottle from their package and immediately smelled their mother's perfume.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so and again, it's one of those things where I opened myself up. It wasn't like I looked up any other people's formulas for what it is to do any necromancy work at all. It was really, or we're connecting to the other side. It was really more about going in and listening to my herbs, listening to the stones, which ones wanted to go in and why. And again, in the science of witchcraft, what we learn in the Cabot tradition is that every herb, every stone has a frequency, has an intention, and reflects a certain light that comes from the universe. So when you put a philtre together with those specific intentions or planetary correspondences, and then you augment that with your own energy, your own lights, then you're expanding that light source. You're expanding that transmission of energy. So people say that as soon as they open the box, they can feel the magic, even when the bottle's still wrapped up, and when they're traveling long distances, again, they've got to be in like lots and lots of layers of bubble wrap. And I want to make sure that it's fully cushioned on its journey to where it needs to go. And they go all over. So.
Wow, that's awesome. So I'm curious, kind of segueing off of Rania's question, when you get called or asked to do a custom bottle, however it happens, to do a specific bottle for a specific intention. Let's say it's for maca, which is one that you have and we love. So for that, as an example, for anyone that doesn't know who maca is or whatever, but like, if you went in to research this deity to find out, we know, like you said, certain stones and herbs have certain vibrations and frequencies. But what is your research process into like finding out what this bottle needs for this particular intent?
All right. Well, part of it is always going to be academic, right? I have a really extensive witch scholar library, and that has, again, ever since I've got into the craft, which is for pushing 30 years. So, but I'll go there first sometimes, or I'll go into alpha. And again, in the Cabot tradition, alpha is a means of counting your mind down to a place where it can more easily receive information. And it also depends on whether you already have a working relationship with a specific deity. And I already had a relationship with maca that was initiated by Laura Cabot. My very, very first reading with her, psychic reading with her, and she just got this vibration that maca was around me, and I didn't know who she was. And so she said, do you have any Celtic ancestry? I'm like, oh yes, that's at least half of my ancestry, and if not more. And she said, oh, well, then you're already a child of Maca's. You just need to open yourself up and allow. And that's one of our big words in the tradition is allow her to make herself known or introduce yourself to her. Again, it's like when you can't just go knocking on the door of a stranger's house and say, hi, let me in. Mm-hmm. So it's about, putting out an invitation, and Maca came through immediately. And the very first painting that I did of her was of her in and again, I started sketching and drawing one day a painting came out, and it just kind of literally emerged out of me. I had no formal canvas to do it on. I literally had a plank of wood, and it was like, that's what it is. And so when I painted it, and it's on the wall behind me, and again, you can get that at society6.com. Something told me to put mushrooms in the picture, and I really didn't know Maka all that well, and I'm not a person that has ever done any sort of mushrooms in my art or any sort of fairy lore type of things with mushroom circles or anything like that. But something just said, make sure you put mushrooms in the painting, so I did, and only to find out years and years and years later, when I finally became a Cabot priest and then a high priest, knowing that mushrooms are actually one of Maka's correspondences. And so when you already have a connection with the deity, you just say, what do you want in the bottle? What is it that you want? What specific ingredients do you want to transmit? Part of it has to do with a colorway or a color frequency to what's in the artwork itself already. But this is my Maka bottle now, and she's gone through several iterations, but there's always an element of a crow in there because she's the crow goddess of the ancient Celts. And and there's feathers in there as well. But typically I'll include black feathers in it. This has got amethyst and lavender and cobalt or lapis lazuli, ametrine. This one has also got some peridot in it. So it just depends. And at the very, very top are mushrooms.
The fact that you remember all that.
Well, you're looking at the long list of things there, but yeah, I mean, but when again, it's like, so it serves multiple purposes, I mean, they are pieces of art in and of themselves, but when you look at the layers, I usually try to, if I can, do a chromatic layering of it, so it's almost like an alpha countdown, but within a specific colorway. And you can basically look at the strata, so you can work your way through and select a specific herb or select a specific correspondence that you want to focus on, and then let that light come through. So they serve a multitude of purposes, and one all at the same time. So it really just, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon.
That's awesome. I know Rania and I know this already, but I think the listeners would love to hear about it. So you spoke on getting asked by a friend or getting a custom order for a bottle, how that process is. Talk to us about when a deity themselves kind of says, hey, look, I need you to work on this.
Yeah, that's always really surprising and humbling, because, when you get chosen or when you get spoken to by a deity or a spirit, it's because you personally have some sort of energy vibration that they are in congruence with. And so it's finding, acknowledging, first of all, that it's there, and then asking what they want, and then just listening. And part of that is just kind of knowing that there's an intention coming through and going, oh, all right. Sometimes I've just looked at a row of bottles that I've collected, and I'll go, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's coming through. And so Jupiter happens that way. And Jupiter is the god of expansion and success, and there's a lot of autumnal spices and herbs that are connected to Jupiter, like cinnamons and allspices and clove, and at the same time turquoise and lapis, and even in some ways amethyst, any sort of royal colors about influencing other people, and again for the good of all, not influencing for only personal means. So, Jupiter came through. So I did several Jupiter bottles, and Hermes Trismegistus. I put a bottle together for the 7 Hermetic Principles, and went to look at all my Mercury correspondences in my herb cupboard that would be in congruence with that intention. So it's when you hear something, you just kind of act on it. It's not anything that you question. You just go, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. I have full trust in knowing that my protection boundaries and my protection shields are good enough that anything that is of the proper intention is going to make it through. And so I never ever question anything that comes in as a request, whether that be from a person or from what we'll just call source, whatever that source information is going to be.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Rania, you had another bottle that you were wanting to
The Lady of the Lake.
Yeah.
That's a
We both
very
love that one.
Wow. Okay. So there's another one, a prime example of I had no intention of making a Lady of the Lake. It was really looking at a bottle that I had that was a teardrop shape, like a drop of water. And there she was. She just appeared. And it was like, okay, so I'm going to put a Lady of the Lake filter together. And it was all aquatic colors. And so in this teardrop shaped bottle, it started off with basically as if you're in the depths of the lake itself. So the very, very bottom of it is moss and actual dried moss. And then there's a layer of labradites, which has got a wonderful opalescent quality to it, and sprinkled with some peridot, with some green, just to kind of pull you from those green depths. And then moving into this wonderful aquamarine layer that's encrusted with seed pearls inside of it. And then that takes you all the way up to quartz. And then floating in the quartz is an actual piece of Dover chalk. So you actually have a piece of England in there. And then as you rise to the top, you rise to your sovereignty and you rise to get your Excalibur sword. So, and again, the Excalibur sword is one of the prime tools that we use in the Cabot tradition, because that's how we are initiated. The light from Excalibur has been part of the Kent tradition of witches that was bestowed upon Laurie Cabot by her elders, and that light has been transferred to all of our Excalibur swords. So I make sure that before the bottle goes out, not only do I charge it, but I also make sure that my Excalibur sword has touched it, so that the light of Excalibur is being transferred into this bottle, and that someone who has this will connect all the way back to the Lady of the Lake. And when I first made this, I had no intention I had no idea that it was going to be as popular as it is, but they just flew off the shelves. And again, when I say shelves, I mean my own, and flying out into the Etsy world. So
That's awesome. That bottle has such a calming, just looking at it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I anoint most of my balls with the Cabot high altar formula, because it's otherworldly. But this one really wanted to be more aquatic. So I added also lotus oil to it. So when you smell it, it's just like being near a body of water. I mean, you can just, it's ethereal. It's transcendent in many ways. So, and again, I'm humbled. It's one of those things where she wanted to come through. And we have a lot of Cabots out there that are very connected to our Arthurian lore, and just snatched them up because they wanted to have that as part of their altar or part of their magic. And so that inspired me to continue with the Camelot collection. And so then King Arthur came next, and Merlin, and Guinevere, and each one again is in a sense representing for us a virtue. So, when the Lady of the Lake is about intuition, as far as being open to information and source, King Arthur was about self-sovereignty, about teaching you to own your power, to not lord it over anybody else, but how to rule your life wisely, your own life wisely. But many times we need to step away from the fray, or step away from the chaos that is our daily lives, and go inward for introspection. And that's how Merlin came about, was about being a hermit, about literally stepping away from. It's not leaving, it's basically creating a space for yourself so that you have time to reflect and to integrate and to do your magic uninterrupted, as Merlin did. And then Guinevere appeared, and it was like, okay, so what do we need right now? What do people need right now? And one of the biggest challenges that people have is forgiving people for either forgiving themselves for a wrong that they have done that they've never ever let themselves off the hook for, or they feel that they can't get past a certain thing, and or they can never forgive someone for something that has been done to them. And you carry these burdens with you; they weigh you down, and those are all hindrances to, first of all, living your best life, and secondly, doing your best magic if you're hindered or if you are fettered by any sort of chains from the past. And again, it doesn't mean that you are off the hook if it's a major transgression, but if you can't get past little things of forgiving someone, it doesn't mean you have to let somebody back into your life. It just means you need to let go of whatever it is that happened, because it's it's still carrying, you're still carrying that. There's
Closure.
a lesson. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lesson, obviously, and you can take that lesson. I think if you can finally get to the point when you look at a transgression that's happened to you, sometimes it might have happened for you. It might have actually been something that will give you a tool to not ever have to do that again or go through that again. It's like, you're wiser because of that. So Guinevere really is a filter for forgiveness. And that layering of hers is all in purples and pinks. And it starts off with elderberries. And elderberries in our tradition specifically are for letting go of past transgressions, of any guilt that you might have had from anything that you had done or had made a decision about. Going up to roses and going up to amethyst and then lavender, and then here again ametrine and more rose petals and pink sea salt. Salt is a neutralizer, and salt is a part of our tears. Tears are healing waters. I always think tears are never anything to shy away from or to hide, because they are literally transmitting salt and neutralizing, if you think about a tear. And that takes you all the way up to frankincense, where there's an aspect of sanctity and sacredness in the work that you're doing when you're forgiving, to quartz. Clear quartz is always our augmenter or our magnifier. So, and at the very, very top always is your sovereignty. And so she's got a purple crystal on hers. What was really, really interesting about the King Arthur bottle was that in that sea of quartz, it wanted a drop of dragon's blood. And so that, again, is something for you to remember, that we all carry this intense life energy that needs to be acknowledged. In everything that you're doing, you need to know that at the very core of who you are, you've got a heart that's beating. And that is sometimes one of the most fragile things in our body, and also sometimes the strongest.
I love that, because I'm a huge comic book fan, but I love that in some of your bottles, you just have little Easter eggs like that, like, the Dover chalk or the dragon's blood, or
Yeah.
I
Well, I try to put them in when I can, and because those are things, not only just hidden gems for you to find, but it's again, we are all multi-layered beings, and so if you can, again, peel a layer away, it's like an onion. What's underneath? What's the next layer? And we always get really, really raw and vulnerable when we get to the center. Again, we're carrying our armor around all the time. And again, one of those great things about like the Merlin bottle is for you to let that armor go for a while and just kind of get into your ropes and just be and listen and connect, and Merlin has the charm of making. The film Excalibur has a spell that Merlin says that's a pretty old spell. I think it's actually from ancient Irish, but the words Ananathra Uthwas Bethat Dolfialdienvi is like a serpent's breath, life and death, thy charm of making. So you're acknowledging that aspect of the coiled dragon that's waiting, always waiting. And if you call upon it, and if you're worthy, that magic will come. It's not ever to be done lightly. It's something that there has to be an intention that's said with it. And then, again, as with all spell work, you need to make sure that your timing is right. What day are you working your spell? What time are you working it? What astrological sign are you working under? Are there any conflicts with the planets? It's a really, really complex formula. Magic isn't just, oh, I'm going to go make some magic today. It's like, well, you could, but you have no idea what kind of chaos you could be unleashing as well. So you need to be really mindful that you're working
parts.
Yeah, you're working in conjunction with the planets, and our own Book of Shadows in our tradition is about, when you open it up, you're opening yourself up to the light of the universe. And if you ever get to the point where you're going to say you're going to control how the universe evolves or revolves, you're not going to be successful in your magic.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
On that, like, say when you get a custom order or you get called to do something, does that ever, I'm sure, play into like, okay, I need to do this, but I'm going to have to wait a week or two to
Exactly.
get it?
No, exactly. So someone will say, I need this done. I'm like, okay, well, the planets aren't looking good right now. So can you wait? Or, is this something that you need to do or you need to have immediately? And it's not that we can't do that. It's just not always advisable. And again, when we cast our circles, we try to cast it with to clear any extraneous positive or negative energies and forces that are out there. And but I always look upon it as the easy metaphor to think about is a bank account. Like you could have a lot of money in your bank account to go do a spell, but if the universe is not entirely in its best aspect, there might not be a lot of money in your bank account. So you make, it's the difference between doing a spell that where you have $100 to work with, again metaphorically, or maybe just 25 cents. So that's going to be the level of the magic that goes through. So you have to always make sure that whenever you do your bottle, it's correct. I did a Joan of Arc bottle and as a custom order for someone, and I needed to wait until a Tuesday to do it because Tuesday is Mars. It's all about action and force and movement. And each one of the days of the week has a specific correspondence to an intention, and then each one of the hours does as well. So, you need to make sure that, if you're going to do something in that, it could be like, well, I'm going to do it on a Tuesday because it's action and force, but I may be doing it in the hour of Venus because there is a love intention as to why you had to do that action and force. So it's all of this eluded me as a practicing witch before I became a Cabot witch. And then that's when it all kind of clicked, when I really it all kind of fell into place about the science of why we do our spells and how spells work. And I found that my spells became much more effective once I started practicing it within the specific lens of being Cabot. And I'm not saying that this is the only way. I'm just saying this is the best way for me. There are wonderful traditions of that run the full spectrum of however you want to practice. There is no one way and there is no best way. There is only the best way for you. And so I always try to make sure that, I'm always holding my own ego in check and my own sovereignty in check to never make another judgment about another person's practice or another person's magic. How can you possibly make any sort of criticism about how somebody else does something? That's not your magic.
Everyone's path is their own.
Yeah. And I think one of the great things about it is about, following whatever tradition you do, is if you are following it to how you personally are contributing to that, that's about why you are there for that specific tradition, whatever that tradition may be.
I concur with that, though. It was the same with me when I became a Cabot because I'd been practicing for a long time and things had been effective, but once you see how the correspondences and, everything else, and like you said, the science behind it, which is what our tradition is about, then it all it's kind of like wiping the lens, unfogging your glasses.
Yeah, in that type of context, it is. It's the more in a sense, we always look at it as a science. When you cast a spell, you try to write out when you did it, and all of the astrological information if you can, like keep it in your book of shadows or have a book specifically just for spells. And then in a sense, as an experiment, right, as a science experiment, did it work or did it not work? And if it didn't work, cross it out and do another one. And it's a total trial and error whether you're going to have a spell work or not. It becomes more of a confirmation to you when you write a spell and it comes true and you didn't even cast it. That's when you know that the science is working. Like if you have all your correspondences correctly done, and I literally have done this. I've written spells and then they have come to pass without me even having to actually cast it in a circle. So,
well, in a sense, I don't know if you've ever looked at it this way, but you're casting a spell every time you make a bottle.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and again, so I always try to make sure that the intention and the time is right. And if it is, this is the other wonderful magical thing about it, is if it is, time disappears. I can be at my work table for hours and it will seem like minutes. Like I'll walk away from it and sometimes an entire day is gone and I've just been in that flow. You're in a space of time out of time. And it's never exhausting. That's the other thing. People ask, do you get tired doing this? I'm like, well, I I'm exhilarated and I'm invigorated when I'm done, but there are times when my fields lie fallow, or I have kind of like these kind of waves and these crests, and then I'll have these kind of deep depths where I won't be bottling at all. And I started questioning, am I supposed to keep doing this? And I wasn't getting any answers. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just like hang up my shingle or take down my shingle, I'll be done. And it's always at that point that I get a request, or I'll get a message from, the last one was from Maka herself, and it was 2 words: keep bottling. And I was like, okay. And then right after that happened, boom, and more intentions came through. And I was like, okay, I'll make these bottles. I put them up on Etsy. I have no idea if anybody wants them. And boom, they go. So, my suggestion is, I'm not plugging my site. It's more along the lines of, go there, and if you find anything that goes, oh, I know you, or oh, I've been looking for you, then most likely that's the bottle that's supposed to go to you. If you don't feel anything, then by means, don't buy anything. Again, this is not the venture, and this is not to make money as a number one for me, because I have a full-time job. This is about helping people. This is about, why have you been called to service, and how are you helping people in doing this? It gets very, very interesting and flattering when you start getting collectors. People that have like over 30 of your bottles, because obviously they are finding some sort of a parallel to your magic that's augmenting their own.
And that, in my opinion, and Rania can chime in on this as well, I think that no matter what you're doing, whether it's a bottle, whether it's doing readings, house blessings, whatever it is, that's the reward, is knowing that people are actually being helped, but not just helped. Like you said, it can be flattering at times just because they're so impressed, or, whatever, with what you're putting out. So,
right. Yeah. And at the same time, it's extremely humbling. I mean, I didn't ask for any of this at all. It was just, again, I kind of found myself inside of it. It's been a recurring theme throughout my entire life, magical life, is that I have just turned around to find myself inside of it. I always said that if I ever wrote a book, it would be called The Accidental Mystic, because I didn't ask for any of it. It always just kind of happens. And I guess the true test is, what do you do when it happens? Because some people are not always equipped to deal with the unexpected, or to deal with unexplained phenomenon. And fortunately, I was raised in a very, very open-minded family, and very psychically gifted family. So my gifts were never, ever squashed or told not to use. It was just more along the lines of finding a way to integrate it with your life naturally, so that you're not making it something separate, that you're not like, okay, let me turn into psychic for a second. It's just being on. Our whole family is connected that way. If anything happens in our family, we're all connected. We all know, the phones will start ringing because everybody knows what's up. When you see the film Practical Magic, and Jillian has her problem, and she makes her phone call, and everybody knows that it's Jillian on the phone. That's what our family is like, And so people are like, well, that's just fiction. I'm like, if that's never happened to you, then I can understand how you could say that. And I can't prove to you that what happened in our specific instance happened. I can't prove it, but we all know it. So,
do you have any favorite bottles? I mean,
I do. One of them, interestingly enough, around Valentine's Day, I did a desire bottle, which was medieval, and it kind of harkens back to the unicorn tapestries, and that one disappeared quickly. And again, I don't always do love bottles. You have to you have to be in the right window for it. But right after Valentine's Day, I was consumed with this feeling of heartache, and it wasn't my own. I'm living a very emotionally fulfilling life, so it wasn't my own. I thought, okay, somebody needs something. Somebody needs some help regarding a heartache. And being an avid tarot reader, and if you know your tarot cards, like the tarot card for that is the Three of Swords. And, that one's the, where you've got the 3 swords piercing the heart, and you just kind of, and when it shows up in a reading, you're kind of like, okay, depending on where that is in the reading, it either happened in the past or it could be happening now, or be on the lookout for it. But again, it's kind of like that forgiveness bottle. If you've got heartache that you haven't healed, then you need something to maybe help process that material. And the Queen of Hearts came through with that. And, the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland is kind of a devious, malevolent, malicious figure. So it's like, what, huh? What? Okay, whatever. But it was more along the lines of the Queen of Hearts and she's also that one when she comes up in just a standard deck of cards. There's a power to her, and the Queen of Hearts will always have her way. And so it's like, okay, so if you can tap into that, maybe you can say that the Queen of Hearts, if she brooks no opposition, then neither should you. You should go forward and not be held back by this. And so it was taking that bottle, or taking that tarot card and translating it into a bottle. And this one is loaded with energy.
That one I've always loved. I mean, it's
loaded
so
with energy,
striking initially, just because of the swords, going into the
piercing
top.
through the top of the cork,
Piercing
right?
through the
Yeah, and going through the crown. So,
wow.
But again, these are all love correspondences, and again, starting off with my favorite elderberries, and then working your way up to roses and rose quartz and pink sea salts and clear quartz. Hibiscus flowers, just, there's a love energy that's still in here. And if you're feeling that you've been pierced once, twice, multiple times, but you've been burned in a relationship, this is about letting the bottle take all of that, letting the bottle kind of absorb and at the same time transmit and heal. So again, I had no idea I was going to make this. It just happened. I go in and go, oh, I've got swords. I've got sword charms, which, and then it just kind of like came, and I was like, oh, then that's what that's going to be. And then invariably, and I know like you were talking about the Enchanted Garden. Ages ago, I'd done a huge bottle with almost every one of my herb correspondences, and they were these enormous things. And I was like, okay, that's great. Maybe people want a smaller version of that. But the Enchanted Garden was my thought that if you don't have the space or the finances to put a full apothecary cover together, because they do get pricey,
they do.
after a while. What if you had one where you had every herb at your disposal? Every one of your herbs that you needed for a spell could be in one specific place. And again, if you know the science of witchcraft, you call on the specific light of that herb. So if you're doing a working spell, you could write that spell down and then place the Enchanted Garden on top of it, call forth the herb that you needed from it, and then send out your spell. So one of my alumni, who's also a witch, he said, so this is kind of like the skeleton key of spell bottles. And I thought, yeah, that pretty much. I mean, pretty much it's gonna have all that information for you. Whether or not you agree specifically that this is gonna work, that's entirely up to you. It's the intention that got put into it. But again, I'm always kind of living life in a medieval world, or kind of a medieval flair. So I put the unicorn tapestry image on there of the unicorn, because the unicorn is kind of like the embodiment of all goodness that's in there. And then that horn is sending that light out, is a transmitter. And but I also wanted to make sure that if you're just getting this random bottle, in a sense random meaning that you don't know what's in it, and I can't really specifically list absolutely everything in it. I also have a list of all the herbs that go in it on a piece of parchment, and that goes with the bottle so that you can put it in your book of shadows. So, and it doesn't have everything. It's got my most called upon pieces, right? There wasn't room to put every single herb in there, but the ones that I go to a lot, and Rania, I'm looking right here, Dittany of Crete. Dittany is a very powerful manifester, and a little Dittany goes a long way. So if you're working with Dittany at all, I recommend that they use it really responsibly, but also just carefully, and you don't need a lot. So, but
I use Dittany in a lot of my manifestation work.
Yeah. But people ask, what's your favorite of all time? And I would say that goes between cinnamon and allspice. Part of it is I'm an autumn person by nature. I'm a Sagittarius. I was born on Thanksgiving. those spices have kind of been prevalent in my life through most of my important times of my life, and I've just found myself constantly going back to them. But you know, it's like allspice in a sense, like it acts like a quartz. It brings out the best of anything that you're going to do. I mean,
Oh
the word
my gosh.
all, the word all is
does.
already in it.
I
Yeah.
just realized, you know, we try to, as a way of thanking people for their time, send out some form of, you know, a gift of our appreciation or whatever. And I've been like, what do I get someone? But I just realized I make this magically infused cherry brandy, and it has allspice and cinnamon. It's very autumn
Oh yeah.
smelling and tasting. That's what I'm sending you. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's, you know, the all in allspice really is everything.
It
And
is.
I
I
mean,
love that
and
one too.
yeah, it's just a great, naturally as a berry, it has all of those flavors of fall infused in one berry. But you know, in our Cabot Book of Shadows, it is in a sense that which augments everything. You know, it brings out the best of everything. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
I did, while you were talking about that, I'm curious, and I don't think I've asked this in our brainstorming call, but what, just average, and I know they're different, but on average, what would you say start to finish just so people know how much goes into these, the time it would take?
Oh, that could be anywhere from weeks to a matter of hours. It just depends. But there's always a brainstorming time period where you're just letting it kind of marinate in your head, and you're jotting notes down and running to books and doing some research. You know, when I tell my witchcraft students that I'm mentoring in the Cabot tradition, I always tell them, you know, there's no one perfect way to do a spell. Like, you know, if you're going to do a love spell, you can look up love spells, you know, and find, you know, hundreds of them. That has nothing to do with it. You can look, research, see what people have used. What do you resonate with? You know, you're the one that's doing it. You know, don't use something that does not have a good frequency with you, you know, because your energy has to go through it. So find one that works best for you. So if I'm, you know, sometimes I'll jot down a list and then cross off things as I'm working my way down. Reverend Penny Cabot always told me, you know, make sure that your spells are clear, make sure they never get muddy. Don't just throw so many ingredients in that you can't discern what the intention is. Sometimes less is more. You know, it doesn't mean filling up a bottle with everything that, you know, that needs to be in there. The Enchanted Garden was different because the intention was for there to be everything in there for you to pull out what you need for your use. Like it's a general use. But the other bottles, all of those have a specific intention, and everything that's in them has been, this is what I have, or this is what it's supposed to be in here. This is what it told me. And so, and again, I know that sounds really weird if you've not had a conversation in a sense with an intangible or something that is abstract, but that's how it works. You know, artists are naturally psychic because we already visualize in our head what it's going to look like before it even happens. Like in a sense, we're precognitive to the end result. At the same time, we always need to be open to outcome, that it may not be exactly how you envisioned it, but it got you the inspiration to get to that specific place.
Kind of going back to what you said earlier, allowing. You just have to allow.
Oh yeah, you have to allow. It's not a matter of believing, because believing is putting yourself in a fixed place. Allowing is letting whatever come in, and then finding your truth with it, and finding your agreement with that allowance. And I used, when I wrote the incantation, the invocation for Guinevere, it was about inviting her in, and then allowing your history to be seen by her, to let her come in and make a review of that material, and then help you through it. You know, that, and then that's a sacred conversation right there.
Mm-hmm. For sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Rania, what's your next question? Let's just rapid fire on Paul here.
What is my next question? Have you grown any herbs for your bottles, like magically?
Yes.
I'm curious too.
Yeah. So we just went through a full landscape redo 2 years ago, and we talked to our landscape architect, and I just said, all right, so as we're proceeding forward, these are the things that are going to be my must-haves, because I'm going to be using them. And so, and they're your standard, some of them are standard, right? So we've got lavender and rosemary, and thyme. Were like the ones, because they grow very, very well in Southern California where I am. And they're Mediterranean, so they work really, really nicely in this specific climate. But I also wanted to have some artemisia, some wormwood, and not in a sense to distill my own absinthe, although I've taken wormwood and made absinthe bottles, absinthia bottles, so calling upon the Green Fairy. So that's, again, kind of inviting in magic for visionary purposes, and again, none of this is ingestible. Everything in all my bottles is all sealed. I mean, sealed to where you cannot get the cork off. You'd have to work really, really hard. And spell bottles, by nature, a spell goes into a bottle. So if you uncork it, the spell is broken. So, you want to always kind of revere it and kind of hold it in a place of respect, that it's holding on to a specific intention. I'm kind of veering a little off topic right now, but I do want to talk about, when spell bottles were originally made or found, they were found in England, and around the 16th, 17th century are the oldest ones that we can find. And the inclusions of those were typically like pins, needles, nails, sometimes human hair or nail clippings, all from the person who owns the bottle. It wasn't anybody else's. It wasn't like, what we see in Hollywood about, gathering materials from other people. These are used as, in a sense, a proxy for that person. And then these bottles would be sealed with that intention of protection, and they'd be placed either at the very, very far reaches of your property or within your home, or sometimes walled up in your chimney, because they keep finding them still to this day.
They just found one recently, like about a year ago.
Yeah, with these curious objects inside of them. And so, what goes in them has an intention. Like if people who felt they might have been bewitched, or they might have had a spell cast on them or a curse put on them, these are, in a sense, counter curses. And so in our whole history of the medieval ages through, all the way through Salem, of witch trials and people being afraid of witches and accusing people of practicing witchcraft, it's very interesting that you have common folk, if you want to refer to people that are not practicing, they're using folk magic that they would not themselves consider witchcraft to protect themselves from people that they believe were, actively hexing or cursing people. So that's a really, really fine gray line there.
Ronnie and I were just talking about that same thing.
Yeah. And again, interesting that I'm talking about things that you are already on frequency with or in correspondence with. But I think one of the interesting names for the spell bottles, based on the salt crusting that they would use on some of the ceramics, were called graybeards. A graybeard is actually, the name of the spell bottle by its own description. Yeah. So we can look at our popular wizard figures like Gandalf the Grey from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and just think that there's an inherent sense of wisdom about that. And anyone, and I've gone a lot silver in my age now. And there was a point where I was dyeing my hair, and I had a message from a crone in a dream that said, "Stop. You need to let it show through. That's your wisdom." So just kind of know that actively you can wear your wisdom, whether that be with a beard or with your silver in your hair. You find a time where you can welcome that and embrace that time in your life as being someone who's earned all of that through everything that you've been through. It's a healthy perspective to look at. But going back into growing things, and if anybody's interested in doing this themselves, my suggestion, because one of the great questions I get is, how do you get things from not rotting? Well, and it's true, because when you put anything that is fresh and not dried into a bottle and then you close it up, right, the moisture that isn't remaining in there is going to start, working its way
Yeah.
through whatever organic material is there. So you've got to make sure that everything is dried. And so the big question I get is, well, what if I want to put like, a whole flower in a bottle? And I'm like, okay, well, then put whatever fresh herbs you want into the bottle, don't seal it, and then leave it out for a long time, and make sure that you can either put it like in the sun or in a warm place. Well, I've also found that moisture happens and you get condensation on the top of the bottle, and that takes forever to go away because you're making little greenhouses in a sense. But if you can find a way for like warm air to go by it, constantly pulling it out, or maybe wrap up a little paper towel and tuck it into the top of the bottle so that it starts literally drawing the moisture out, which is how I can sometimes get when I wash my bottles, which is if there's any moisture at all that doesn't want to leave, typically tucking in a rolled up, very, very thinly rolled up paper towel so that it's the tip of it is coming out of the top of the bottle so you can retrieve it. The air will naturally start pulling any moisture away from it. So you never want to put anything that is fresh in a bottle and seal it. So like when I'm gathering my wormwood outside, I always make sure I'm wearing gloves when I'm doing that. I'll make my cuttings and then I'll lay them out and I'll dry them out. Typically, my garage space has a wonderful workbench, but it's very warm in there. So they dry really, really nicely. And, sometimes if you want to preserve the color of flowers or whatever, hang them upside down. Sometimes the colors will actually stay a little bit longer or a little bit more vibrant if you do that. And then once all of your herbs are dried, then you're good to go, So it's like the last batch of wormwood that I had went into my one of my Hecate bottles. And so I'm in the process right now of getting ready to gather some more wormwood. And I want to make sure again that moon is in the right place. So I got to wait for a dark moon for that. And then place it all out so that they dry out, and then I can start making more Hecate bottles. So, and again, the Hecate bottle is it's got the Hecate labyrinth on it. Yeah, and it's got the flame on the top because she's known by having her torch. Again, the gods and the goddesses have a lot of correspondences. You don't want to overburden a bottle with too many layers of symbolism, but everything in the Hecate bottle has a lunar correspondence. So starting off with a very, very dark part of the moon and then working your way up to the light part of the moon in that constant phase. But what I noticed when I had this, and the way that when the sun hits the bottle and you move the bottle, the way there's ripples in the bottle, you can literally create your own, in a sense, time lapse of the moon phase going across the face of the bottle.
Oh, wow.
It'll literally eclipse right in front of you just by the way, and it doesn't work here because of the studio lighting, but if you have it in sunlight and you just hold it side to side, the bottle will eclipse. Again,
that's amazing.
Unexpected phenomenon,
Unexpected.
But unexpected and still welcome. And that one's got Hecate potion on it. So that one's very, very fragrant, and every one of the corks has got some sort of anointed fragrance on it. So that all of your senses are being involved. It's not just looking, right? And sometimes there'll be things inside that you can rattle, you can hear. Sometimes you're encouraged to shake the bottle. Like I make these sun Helios bottles, and I've got little Helios on his chariot riding across the sky. But those are meant to be actively shaken because, you're actively creating energy by doing that.
Vibration.
And everything in the Helios bottle is a sun correspondence. So it's meant to energize you. So if you're feeling like depleted, I've made them for people at work that are on burnout, that just don't have any more energy left. And you need like a source to kind of recharge your energy. And it's not going to it as a dependency. It's meant to activate your own, right? All of them are meant in a sense to spark your own energy.
I love not only just hearing you talk about your process with these bottles is, I can just listen for hours, but I love not only the intent and the research and the time that goes into selecting each correspondence that ties into what you're doing the bottle for, but also how you layer them in such a deliberate way. Like you said with Hecate, from dark to new, and
yeah,
that's amazing. So, for anybody that's listening, I hope they're understanding like the immense thought and time and work and energy that goes into making.
Yeah, the timing, I mean, the time involved in it is also, it's something to kind of factor into it when I'm putting my prices together. And again, I'm not trying to gouge anybody. People look at them and say, that's too rich for me. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm fairly asking, you know, compensation for my time and for the materials that go into it. You know, not, you know, I can't go out and, you know, grow my own quartz. So, you know, I have very good stone sources, and they're reputable. And so, and I want to make sure that where the stones are coming from, the companies that I'm getting them from, are trying to use as ethical a practice as possible.
Which is hard to find, you know.
It is
somebody
hard to
that
find.
you know for sure has ethical sources.
Yeah. So again, a lot of that is just, again, doing your research and making sure that where you find your source material outside of your own self. When I first started, I really wanted to stay as green as possible. I really just wanted to reuse bottles, and I tried to find and I absconded with and procured almost every used bottle that I could find in the region of where I'm living. Like, I go anywhere now, I don't see anything, and it's either because people are now making their own, which is great. Again, no one owns this specific branch of magic. Make your own. You know, if you find one that you resonate with from an artist or from a witch that you like, or that you just feel is would augment yours magic, then support them, whoever they may be. Now I'm getting to the point now where if I want to do, and those were all singletons, in a sense, I would do single bottles, but now I'm doing runs where I need to actually get bottles that are the same, because people all want that one, you know. And so to make multiples of it, I've got to make sure that I'm getting bottles that are the same design, so that when I put it up, everybody can get one. I don't want it to be like a, you know, a Hunger Games kind of situation where people are on or a Pokemon, I got this one and you don't have it because I do. That, again, that brings up all sorts of icky feelings that I don't want my business to be about, or my magic to be about. It's about, and I make something, if I have the means to make multiples, I will. And if you have the opportunity to do it, my personal karma as a shopper is that if I don't get it when I first see it, it usually is not there when I go back anywhere, anytime. So some people will say, oh, I've had this sitting in my cart for a long time, but I never bought it, and now it's gone. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I may not be making that one again anytime soon. Again, it's one of those things where if you miss out on a run, it's because that was the astrological window to do it. And so I may have to wait for another time. And it doesn't mean I'm just going to just drop everything and go make another bottle because it's not on my listing anymore. I have to kind of wait. So if you're patient, again, they move in waves. Whatever's on there is just whatever's happening at that specific time.
I'm glad you touched on that, because I wanted to make sure people, because I know people listening to this are going to be intrigued and check it out. But
Oh, sure.
I
Yeah.
want people to know that, yeah, I mean, he does these during the proper timing, and there's a lot that goes into it. So when you see something that's not available currently, you can't expect him to just, like you said, drop everything and make another one.
But by all means, feel free to drop me a line on, you know, an Etsy message and just say, hey, I was interested in this. Do you know when you're going to be making them again? Or if you have a custom bottle, if there is a specific god that you would like to work, whether you already have a relationship with, but you don't know how to make a bottle or don't have the means to make a bottle, or even, you know, saints, you know. And again, I try to look at any sort of spirit phenomenon as not being contained or not being limited to any one specific belief system. So, you know, we all may have had an experience with a specific saint. I know that I have. And so, you know, it's just, if there's somebody that you would want a bottle for, or you want a bottle to work with, simply reach out and I'll let you know whether it's possible. If it's outside of my wheelhouse, or if I feel that the energy is not correct for me to do that, don't take that as a judgment. It's my vessel, my specific vessel may not have the energy to transmit the magic that should go into that. I'm not saying that will always happen. It's just, you know, there's not always a yes. Sometimes there has to be a no, or I'm not sure, or I need some time to think about that and let me get back to you. But feel free to message me on Etsy.
Well, it's about knowing your limitations and what you're capable of.
Sure. And
doing.
if I can't do it, I'm sure somebody can. I mean, there are witches out there that everyone's got their own contribution. Everyone's got their own way of helping in whatever way they can. And again, I try not to be peering over the fences of other witches and looking at what kind of things they're doing or spell bottles they're doing. Partially, I don't want it to affect how I make my own. I don't want it to be influenced by any other person's decision. I really want it to be authentically original to how I am interpreting that request or how I am interpreting that specific spell intention.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Rania this, and then I'll answer, and then I'd love to know your thoughts, Paul. But I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Sure.
Rania, if you had to pick one or two of Paul's bottles as your fave, what would they be?
What would they be? For sure, maca, the maca bottle. Definitely. There's so many that I would like. And I'll say another two, Ilios and the Lady of the Lake. Those would be my top. Yeah.
That tracks. For me, it would be, I think the Lady of the Lake was the one that spoke to me, and then the Enchanted Garden, because I just think it's such an amazing novel idea. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
But now, Paul, the creator, what if you had to pick one or two?
I have two. One of them obviously is Hallow, because that was the very first one. And then I did a run for a while of a bottle called Salem, and that was Salem just for a Salem. It was a filter for witches, and it was about honoring the 20 people that had passed because of the Salem witch trials. And because we wouldn't be where we are today, we wouldn't be able to practice what we do and to be free if it were not for the sacrifice of these people. And again, we have no evidence that anyone was a practicing witch or what they were accused of. Again, and we know that there was a lot of political hysteria that happened at that time. But it's honoring those people. And so when I go to Salem, if I can find any sort of flora or fauna that are dried, like a leaf from a tree or an acorn or anything, I would try to include that in the bottle so that Salem was part of that, that you were actually carrying a part of Salem with you. And that was loaded with, again, a lot of autumnal specific crystals and herbs. So the colors were all very golden and very brown and very warm and very inviting. And the incantation that I wrote for that specifically was about calling in the Salem 20 as an acknowledgement of their sacrifice and thanking them for the freedom that they have given other people because of what they had to endure and what they had to go through. Salem is a wonderful place to visit, but we always need to remember why. We always need to remember that there was a sacrifice there. So if you haven't been to the Salem Witch Trials Memorial or the Salem Witch Museum, places that go and let you know the history of why that is a place that we now go to, that we flock to, and that we feel a freedom to practice and to be who we are, and to not try to push that on anyone else, right? Especially in our tradition, we don't proselytize. It's really more a question of informing people, so that they know what a witch is and what a witch is not, what we do and what we do not, so that we can quell any misinterpretations or misconceptions that people have about the work that we do. Because again, most of us are called to do healing work. So those are my two favorite, and I haven't made Salem for a while. I made a batch last autumn, and so I just kind of listen when it's the right time. And I want to make sure that there is an agreement, or that there is an allowance from that energy from the 20. Some people who receive them have personal connections to the trials and through their ancestry, and have felt that they are reclaiming a part of their ancestry and their heritage by getting that bottle, because it's connecting to their specific lineage. Other people have had the phenomenon of actually seeing faces, like photographing the bottle and seeing faces reflected in the glass. of women, specifically of women. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, humbling. It wasn't any intention that I placed in. I would get these, people would send me pictures of their bottles, and they would like send circles or put circles around all these little faces that were appearing through. And so that again is more just confirmation that what you're doing is real, that it's not to be taken lightly, and it's to be done with the utmost level of respect.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that one, because that had slipped my mind. But that bottle's gorgeous, first of all, and the artwork and the way that you positioned the artwork, like the picture on the inside of the bottle and everything else, is just phenomenal. But I had a question and I just went blank.
I'm going to talk to, well, while you're thinking about that, the artwork that you're mentioning is from the Cerecismus Triumphatus, which is like a witch hunter's, like a witch hunter's book. And the inside picture that I put a picture behind the label so you could see it in the bottle, and it's of a person levitating. And it's one of those, and it's that image has been used on a t-shirt around town, where it says "Oops." And because it's one of those things where it's like me. Oops, I found myself levitating. I mean, I'm not literally, but it's like you find yourself in a magical situation that you had no intention of being a part of, and there you are. And so it just kind of fit that every single person that has gotten a Salem bottle, I'm sure it's at one point in their life has felt that difference, that they're different from other people. Not better than, not overly special, just different, and not knowing how to categorize what that means to be different. And, in our world where differences are not welcome and are not encouraged, that, everybody wants everyone to be the same, because that reinforces your own image.
Because that would be so interesting.
To be right. So to be different automatically sets you aside. I mean, you're automatically other. If you're a witch, in a sense, you're automatically kind of placed in the other category, which I'm fine with. And there are some people that are not. Again, it's really just trying to be respectful and mindful that not everybody is where you are, and that's okay. As long as you're not trying to force that on anybody else to be just like you, because where is the excitement in that? You can't make a soup with one ingredient, you have water, and it's not soup, it's water. So, you need all of those other flavors to come together, to blend together, to make something. And so in our community, again, just using Salem as a wonderful kind of microcosm, there's a shop for everybody there.
Oh yeah,
you will find something wherever you go. You'll find something for you.
Salem is magical. I actually posted pictures in season 1 of the memorial because there's a lot of listeners that may not have had a chance to get there, may not ever, unfortunately. So I wanted to give them an idea of what it looked like, because that's the first place I go every time I visit.
Yeah.
And it's such a calming and magical place. But touching on what you said about, we don't have any evidence that they were indeed practicing witches, whether they were or they weren't. What I always tell people that bring that up is they still sacrificed and died in the name of witchcraft, which is who we are now. So whether they were or they weren't, they still died for us in a sense.
Right.
So they need to be honored and revered. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they may not be in a place where they are happy to be associated with witches or witchcraft. I mean, because remember, for them that could have been a very frightening thing, and at the same time, there's always a possibility that they were all practicing their own folk magic, not really in a sense thinking about it as witchcraft, but just doing their everyday routines. There are certain traditions that we have, even in our own home kitchens, that can be considered magic. So,
what we call folk magic now wasn't called that.
No, I mean, it's just a way of life. It's just you do what you do. If you spill salt, my natural inclination is to just throw a little over my shoulder. And I mean, it's just how you were raised. No one ever told you it was right or wrong or why. You just do it. And again, as long as you're not harming anybody else. But the powerful thing about the witch memorial for me is having to actually to go to visit it, to actually see the actual stones for each one of the people. You have to step over the testimonies that are written in stone. You have to step over the testimonies of those people. And that in a sense brings it all home, you know, because you're literally having to cross over the words that they spoke. And words
And these were
themselves,
things they spoke right before they died, you know.
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
it was,
Or when they were on trial. And I always would tell my students, specifically in my art history classes that I would teach, that writing is magic in and of itself, because it's a time machine. You know, anything that you read that was written at a specific time is from that person's mind at that time. So if you read it, you are literally going back to that person's thought at that time when they wrote it. So in a sense, it's kind of like time travel. You know, you're not going there to change the timeline, but you're going there to visit that mindset. So when you step over someone's words, whatever they are, that's somebody's thought that has been changed into something physical by translating it into a series of symbols that we call English, you know, writing, and then written in stone. I mean, that act is magical in and of itself.
I've never heard anybody put that into words so eloquently. But yeah, I agree. That's why I have an addiction to, I'm very academia, and I have an addiction of finding old text and books and documents and parchments and things like that on archive.org or whatever, because, and particularly when they're related to magic texts and stuff, because again, like you said, you're reading what they were writing. It's almost like being there as they were.
Oh yeah, I mean, in a sense, like a witch bottle, it's a proxy for a person. I can tell you, I viscerally felt this throughout my entire being when I was in Dublin at Trinity College, and I walked into the long room, and I was surrounded by all of these minds, the evidence that all of these minds existed. You know, that they wrote all of these words and all of these volumes that are in this long tunnel of books. So if you can ever, like even just going to the National Archives, anytime that you can go and be surrounded by that, or go to a museum, you're surrounded by that person's creativity and evidence of their creativity at that time.
Everything is a transfer of energy too. So in a sense, you're picking up on that as well.
Oh yeah, the vibrations that are left behind in artwork. You know, Sister Wendy, the late art history nun, she said that Jackson Pollock's works are probably the most indicative of seeing the process, because of all the layers of the drips that he would paint with. So she said, when you see a finished painting, you don't know what the artist was working on first, or what they were working on, you know, what they finished with, or what errors or changes there were, or modifications they may have made. But with Pollock, you have a chronological layering of paint from when he started to when he finished. The entire process, the entire linear process, is there visually for you to see. And that moment when he's finished, like the moment when he's done, like whatever is on top is the last part, is when it was finished. And she said that in itself is looking at the history of the creation of a piece of work. You know, in one of my bottles, I'm not trying to compare myself to Pollock, genius that he was. But when you see my bottles, you'll know what I started with. Like I started with a certain layer and I worked my way up until I was, you know, and then the cork went on, and, you know, the anointing is the last thing that happens before it goes out. So you get to see the layering process, the thought process that goes into it.
That's a good analogy. I've always looked at Pollock. There's like a chaos and a peace to his paintings.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So. Oh, yeah. You have to let go of any preconceived notion. People will immediately, you know, downshift into it's abstract, so I don't know what that means, or a kid could have done that. It's like, well, kids kind of don't do that. And there was an intent. There was an intention that went behind all of those placements of things. And so you just surrender to it. It's kind of like allowing. You surrender. You surrender to it and just let it speak to you. What kind of feelings does it evoke? You know, that whole idea of abstract expressionism was about, you know, evoking feelings inside of you. How do you feel? And that's in response to the time that you're living in, you know. And so that was his response to, you know, post-World War II. You know, that's when you look at it from that lens, that's really powerful.
It really is.
You know, so, you know, my bottles are a response of the time that we're living in, you know, the need for healing, the need to connect to source, the need to augment your personal energy, your personal magic. And at the same time, giving credence and acknowledging where this phenomenon comes from. They started off as protective talismans, and they've evolved over time to be these vessels that transmit an intention beyond just protection.
That's, I want to touch too, and this kind of segues organically, lucky enough, but Paul is an amazing artist. He won't say that because he's so humble, but he's an amazing artist. And if you actually, the maca painting we're talking about, if you look in the top right corner of his screen, that's hanging right there. And I've posted pictures of my altar from maca that has one of the Society 6 prints for it as well. But
Yeah.
leading up to that, all that to say, talk about, because I know that you do a lot of your own artwork for your bottles. So talk about the process for that. Is that like when you're called to do a bottle, are you called at the same time to produce that piece of art, or is it something maybe you've already done in the past and you just kind of pull it back out? Or
that all depends. It all depends. So the maca bottle has the picture of the painting that I did on it. Other artworks that I do will just kind of manifest. The Arthurian pieces, I have a penchant in my heart for the Pre-Raphaelites, the artists that worked in the late 1800s through the early 1900s. Partially because they're all, or most of them are very Camelot driven and very connected to the Arthurian mythology. There was an inherent need to break away from academic art or art that was solely based on the more, I would say, the equitable art, the more decorative arts, and then we got into this kind of mass-produced thing. And the Pre-Raphaelites kind of wanted to step away from all this and go back to the medieval times, you know. And it's like, I'd love to go back to the medieval times myself, just like Sister Wendy would, but as long as I could take a dentist and antibiotics with me. You know, and their work, because it's so old now, it's considered public domain. So if I can find an image that is honoring my Pre-Raphaelite brethren, that I can bring in, I'll do that. You know, so I've done that with obviously with you know, King Arthur and Guinevere, and so it really just depends on if there's something that I physically want to make for a model. You know, all of the layouts for the cards and everything, that's my own graphic design. And those cards take a while to put together too, you know, because I want to make sure that when you're getting something, it's not just a bottle that's a mystery. I want to explain what's inside of it. I don't have, in a sense, the space in order to tell you everything that's in there and what that intention is. You're welcome to do your own research and kind of like figure out why. It's kind of like almost like an added bonus to it, is to go, oh, and I know that I have Cabots that have bought my bottles, and they immediately run to Roy Cabot's The Book of Herbal Magic, and they'll go, okay, why did he put this in here? Why did he do this? And but that helps you learn. I mean, it's a learning device too. It's a learning tool. So I'm trying to give you as much information as I can, and at the same time invite you to be a part of that experience when you're looking at it, and kind of figure out what made you do this, or why was this specific herb chosen. And the other neat thing is that sometimes when I go to bottle a filter, sometimes a specific formula that I normally use, sometimes an herb will say no. I'd be like, oh, no, I'm not putting this one in today. Okay. So, and I just did that for my house blessing bottles. I used to have, there were two herbs, specifically cinnamon and marshmallow root, that did not want to go in this bottle. And they did in my previous versions of that bottle. So I was like, okay, so I omit it and it may just not be the right time for it. It may not be the right light for it.
So they can change. The ingredients can change.
The ingredients can change, yes. And so I'm always apt to make sure that I go back to the listings on Etsy, and if a bottle that has been in a run is on there and the ingredient is different, I'll make sure that that's changed on there. So I never want to falsely advertise anything that's going to in a bottle. You should know exactly what's in it. You know, and again, everything is sealed, so there's really no way that you should be able to connect to anything inside by touch or tactile, but I still want to be aware of people's allergies or if they have any issues to, connecting to certain things. So I always want to make sure everybody knows what they're buying when they get it.
I love that you give, because so much of what we do has always historically been kind of secretive and, guarded and everything else, and it makes it almost seem, I don't know the right word I'm looking for, but the fact that you give like a lens into what's in it, and you're not like saying, hey, this is for this intention, and I'm not going to tell you how I did it or what I put in it, but just trust me.
Well, and again, some people do and some people don't. I have zero judgment either way about it. For me, it's no different than looking up a recipe for chocolate chip cookies, right? How many different recipes are you going to see, and you're all going to get chocolate chip cookies out of it, but they're not the same recipe, right? My filtered recipe is mine. You're welcome to use it and make your own. Remember, I'm not trying to corner the bottle business here. That's not why I'm making these. And I'm making them to help you. You should know what's inside of it if because,
I agree.
what if you really get a good vibrational buzz from it and you don't know what's in it, So you should go, oh, but if you go to this, or if you're looking at the layering and you're saying, oh, this has got labradorite in it. I really like that stone. I'm going to go get some more, or I'm going to go buy one for me. Labradorite's super popular right now.
That's my pendulum, actually.
Oh yeah,
I'm wearing
it's
it now.
super popular. And I put a labradorite cap on the top of my Merlin bottle because sometimes he would be portrayed as having this kind of metal cap on his head. So I wanted to make sure I had something that kind of did that, but it transmits light beautifully, and it's always moving, it's always changing. So it's really it is. The only way that I can describe it again is that this is how I am proceeding forward with it. It's not the only way to do it, and this is how it's speaking to me. And if you want to make your own, make your own. You have the power. If you have the ability to make your own, then make your own. And do your research and figure out what it is that is correct for you. But if you find artists out there, and I'm not talking just specifically me, but if you find an artist out there and you like their work, support them. We are living in a world right now where we should be supporting one another, and that is what I feel has been my contribution. And I go back to Lori Cabot, telling me your life is going to change. And it changed in many ways. My mundane life, had some wonderful, expansive challenges that happened. But my magical life just went in a direction I had no intention of. And I'll just be honest, I didn't know how to do any of this back when I initiated. It's just, I found myself inside of it. And then I found myself expanding and learning and growing. And we're always learning and growing. There's no end. Our reading lists go on and on and on, and we'll never ever get to read everything, but it's what are you drawn to that day,
Well, and it's kind of like you touched on in the beginning of the episode. Reverend Mother told you that, you're going to find your gift or your way to contribute to the world. And we all have that, whether it's what you do with the bottles, or whether it's, art, or whether it's writing or podcasting or whatever it may be. We all have something. That's
when I meet people, I love to ask, what's going on for you? What's your wheelhouse? I've never been really good at small talk, because my experience in life is too short for it. We need deep conversations. We need meaningful connections. We need probing questions. And when I meet people, if we've got an opportunity to go deep, it's like, where are your ancestors from? Where are the bones of your family? And I know that can sound like kind of morbid, but it's more along the lines of, instead of saying, there's a rude way of asking somebody, where they're from, when they're from, they could very well be from your nation from multiple generations, and they may not look it. So there's this assumption that they're not, and that's not it. It's like, where is your ancestry? Where are your bones? Where do you hail from? Where is your lineage? And sometimes that's kept from you. I don't want to say that it was physically kept from me. It just really wasn't discussed. And it wasn't until ancestry.com came along and sending in your DNA information that you find out where your bones are. You find out where you hail from. And for me to come from a Celtic, Mexican-American, Native American lineage, which all come and all have their own magical traditions and their own experiences, mythologies, methodologies, practices, and to not have any sort of window into that until afterward, or to find out that, for me specifically, that I have ancestors in Kent, England, where the Cabot Kent tradition comes from, that I have connections to Carmarthen, Wales, which is, I happened to find out when I was reading a text called the Black Book of Carmarthen that was written in Wales in the same century where my ancestors were living there. All of that is confirmation. That's it. And I took all of that back to my Reverend mother, to Laura Cabot, and she says, so there's your confirmation as to why you're here in this tradition. The ancestors have been guiding you, so it's about listening. I go back to where I talked about it in the beginning of the podcast. It's about listening and making yourself open to information, and then learning to discern, or through research, finding out what that information means to you, what that is, why that was presented to you in that specific way. But to know that, I come from a very, very long lineage of people that are inherently Celtic. And even through my father, who was Mexican-American, his ancestors are really from Mexico, and doing deep research, most of those people that were living in Mexico were from Spain, from the Iberian Peninsula, where there is a huge Celtic population. So the Celts have been kind of guiding me all along. And I just go back and I look at every text that I've ever needed for my research for my third degree, I have owned and didn't know that I needed it.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah. To get my Excalibur sword that I needed for my initiation, when Lori told me I needed to get one, I'm like, well, I have one. And she's like, why do you have one? I'm like, because I was told I needed to get one. She said, well, when did you get it? I said, 14 years ago. So, it's like, again, those are great stories, the great anecdotes. But for me personally, it just means that if you listen and you don't, in a sense, question why, and you don't find that there's anything asking you to do something, dangerous, or anything that you would consider to be against your moral background or your moral fiber. But if you get a nudge into a direction, then pay attention as to why. I got nudged into bottles. I got really nudged into bottles.
Nudged,
and then even when I thought it,
and
then when I thought it was done, I was told I wasn't.
Do you have any new inspirations for like new bottles?
Yes, I do. Well, I want to continue my Camelot collection. I had done a singleton of Morgan Le Fay many years ago. And so she wants to come back. So I'm working on some for her. And then Lancelot wants to come forward.
Oh, I was just about to ask about
yeah. And Lancelot is all about valor. It's not about his entwinement or his tryst with Guinevere. It's about valor, because there is this a knightly aspect that is very admirable about going in armored, prepared, ready to defend, in search of the Grail, in search of the betterment of mankind, or in the search of the salvation for all people, to restore. And the great quest. All of us are questers. All of us are on our quest for our own personal Grail. So I think that Lancelot is going to be a good addition to that. And then Morgan Le Fay is about self-empowerment, because so many witches find that they are not in their power, or may find that they've been maligned. And Morgan had to deal with that from multiple perspectives. And we've had authors of recent time periods and centuries within the century, or even the 20th century, like Miss of Avalon with Marion Zimmer Bradley, to try to give us a mindset of the women in the story. So Morgan wants to come through. So those are the two that I have kind of percolating now. I'm working on their filters. I'm working on their designs. And what I'll do is I'll go to my herb cupboard and I'll line them up. I'll get them all out first, and then I'll think about the chromatic layering of what order should they go in and what belongs and what doesn't belong based on the energy flow. If there's a break in the flow, I'll bring that piece out and keep going until the flow is clean and not muddy. And
Right.
And sometimes it means that you're not going to load it with a ton of ingredients. Sometimes it may need just like 7 or 10, so it depends. But those are who are coming out now. And again, the house blessing bottle was a request from a friend, but I had enough to make more in case other people wanted them. It wasn't like, you only get the market or the corner on this one. It's like, if other people can benefit from that and I have the means to do more, then I'll do more. So I had a request to make 2, I made 5. And so I'm just being open to outcome. But Rania, I'm also wanting to kind of tap into ancient Greece because I have relationships with Greek deities, working relationships, primarily Athena. So I'll be making an Athena bottle.
Wow.
I've made Neptune bottles in the past, and I think Neptune wants to make a resurgence this summer. So when the sun is at its height, and we're going to the beaches and we're connecting to the ocean and the water element, so there'll be a Neptune. So there'll be a Neptune bottle. And again, I've made Jupiter before, and I've made Mercury before, and Mercury's specific line of Hermes Trismegistus. I've done bottles for Pluto. So it just depends. I did have a request that is a far-reaching one. Someone wanted all the planets. They wanted one for every planet. I'm like, okay, that's going to take me a while.
Wow.
So
that's a project.
It is. But it's one of those things where if you're not in a hurry and they know I'm not going anywhere, and I know they're not going anywhere, so I'm not going away, so it's like, because we're all going someplace. It's like, okay, well, I can do that. So I'm just, I'm being open. And then again, the most recent custom one with St. Joan of Arc, that was a very deeply personal thing for someone. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to tap into what you're feeling about why you need this bottle. And I had not worked with Joan before. And so it was really about asking Joan to come through on behalf or at the behest of someone that works with her. So it's kind of like a meeting through a meeting, a friend of a friend. Right. And she came through, but it was like 3 images of Joan appeared. And I was like, okay, I'm going to send all 3 to this person and say, which one is the Joan that he speaks to you? She's like, oh, it's this one. I'm like, all right, then that's the one it's going to be. It wasn't the one that I would have picked, but it's not about me. So that's the thing. When you do a custom work, you really want that relationship and that conversation happening, so that when they get it, it is fully how they envisioned and how they want that bottle to work with them.
Not unlike when you have someone come to design your house, or when you
exactly.
commission a piece of art or something. Yeah,
exactly.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, we have touched on, I've written down at least 3 other episodes that I want to bring Paul back for.
Sure. I'd be happy to return anytime.
We've got several things that I would love to dive deeper into, but we've already kept you for going on 2 hours, which seems like 10 minutes, but
it goes by fast.
It does. We love talking with you and just getting your insights into certain things and your process and your calling and what you do. So
sure, I'm totally honored. If I have any people that want to follow me, I am on Instagram at the Celtic Cork, one word, the Celtic Cork, and you can also find me on Etsy and Etsy/shop/the Celtic Cork. So Etsy.com. So look up and see if there's anything that interests you and of interest to you. And if you want to send me a request for a bottle or just say, hey, I'd love to hear from you. I hope that you have found that this has been beneficial to you, or a phenomenon that you may not have been aware of that might pique your interest. And I am just very, very happy to be doing the work that I've been called to do.
And we are the better for it, the rest of us as well. So thank you. Rania, do you have any closing remarks for Reverend Paul?
Looking forward to the next podcast, just to dive deeper
Dive
into the
deeper.
whole. Yeah.
Sure. Any topic you'd like. I'm happy to give you whatever thoughts I have on it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And you heard where to follow the Celtic Cork. Go check it out. If you have a custom order in mind, don't hesitate to reach out. Reverend Paul's an amazing soul, and we'll help you get what you need. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, from Mike and Rania and Reverend Paul. I hope you have a great week.